So after notching some wins last week, the failed former president Donald Trump has a pretty serious endorsement failure on his hands now, as the alleged serial groper Charles Herbster has suffered a primary defeat, although Trump did get a win in West Virginia last night. So we're going to talk about it as well as the implications. The big news, of course, Trump-backed Herbster, accused of groping, loses to Pillen in Nebraska. That was the Nebraska gubernatorial. Mooney wins in West Virginia. The mixed results for Trump came in contests pitting him against local Republican leaders. As a reminder, here is Donald Trump talking about the great Charles Herbster, accused of groping at least 8 women.
Democrats, we're going to elect Charles W. Herbster,
A good man.
You're going to send an incredible slate of true American first Republicans to Congress as they get.
The audio at that event clearly run by Antifa, as you can tell. But we could tell what Trump was saying, which is he is endorsing Herbster, and Herbster is good, and Herbster is going to win. But sadly for him, Herbster lost. The results are that Jim Pillen has won the Republican primary in Nebraska for the gubernatorial race. Jim Pillen, it was close. It was close. Basically 34-30. With a third candidate, Brett Lindstrom, coming in at roughly 26% with just the Omaha area. So that is a defeat for Donald Trump. What are the takeaways? Well, interesting article from the New York Times. One takeaway is Trump still did get a win in West Virginia. On paper, West Virginia's new 2nd congressional district should have given an advantage to McKinley, who previously represented a larger area seeking a 7th term. But Mooney, 50 years old, who once led the Republican Party in neighboring Maryland, romped across nearly the entire district. Trump's endorsement is widely seen as powering the Mooney campaign in one of the states where the former president has been most popular. Trump also referring to McKinley as Mooney referring to McKinley as a rhino, which has been a popular attack for Donald Trump. So far this primary season, the J.R. Majewski thing is complicated because J.R. Majewski pledged loyalty to Trump. He was on his knees for Trump, praying at the altar of Trump. But Trump didn't actually endorse Majewski. But after Majewski won, Trump said, like, hey, I didn't even really know about this guy, but he's a Trump guy and he's great. So now sort of like an endorsement going into the general. But listen, Trump's record so far is pretty good, 75% roughly, depending on how you calculate it. And the reason we care about this is not so much because Trump claims he has a perfect endorsement record when it's really a pretty average endorsement record over the last 5 years. That's not actually why we care about this. We care about this because we know that among whether Trump is in a lot of legal trouble and whether Trump has health problems, that another factor that will influence whether Trump tries to run again in 2024 is whether he perceives that he can easily win at minimum the Republican nomination, if not the general. And one of the ways that he and we and others will be able to ascertain whether he's got a shot at the Republican nomination at minimum is whether his endorsement continues to carry significant weight in the 2022 midterms. And so far, it's certainly carrying some weight. In fact, I would even venture to say it's very early, but so far, Trump's record in 2022 is better than his overall record over the last few years. It's very early. We have only a handful of races, and over the next month and really over the next, roughly the next 4 or 5 weeks, we're going to have a number of additional primaries. Trump putting out a series of endorsements yesterday on his website, and many of them are incumbents. So, is it really a big win if you endorse an incumbent and the incumbent wins? I would argue no, but all of it is what can you justify? What can you convince your followers of? And so far, Trump is doing okay. Although, listen, going with the 8 times accused serial groper in Nebraska, maybe it was destined not to go particularly well. Now, later, we're going to talk about Elon Musk saying that if he finishes his purchase of Twitter, he would unban Donald Trump from the platform. I'll give my thoughts on that later. Merely anecdotally, I kind of would love to see what Trump would be tweeting about his Herbster endorsement right now if he were on Twitter. He would probably be saying something like, were it not for the fake, phony, fraudulent allegations of groping, I would have gotten the endorsement win. But the left made it up and blah, 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 something like that. That's my guess of what Trump would be saying about this race if he were on Twitter. But it's good that Herbster lost. Herbster's a disaster. And the fact that it's a loss for Trump just makes it a little bit better. I got an email yesterday from Slug about the topic of the left needing better arguments when it comes to the topic of abortion. In other words, the left needs to be better prepared and better articulate the absurdity of the right-wing position on abortion rights and the obvious logic of the left-wing position on abortion rights in the United States. And Slug pointed out in this email to me, which was really great, a thoughtful email, that one of the main topics of discussion in the abortion rights debate in the United States, at least, between just people who engage in the topic, when does life begin, is this major topic of discussion. Is it a person or not? Exactly when does life begin? What about personhood? And then we say, I would argue accurately so, well, if it's a person 5 weeks after conception, then should there be child support for that person at 5 weeks after conception? Should there be citizenship, even if the fetus is the child of an undocumented immigrant? If it's a person at 5 weeks, then maybe there should be citizenship. And if so, that means you can't deport a pregnant woman, regardless of her immigration status, because she has a real person in the womb. So, there's all these conversations, and it's fine. But Slug argues that it's a waste of time in the sense that at the end of the day, it really is a philosophical question and, in a sense, a religious question, or a philosophical question informed by religion. The anti-choice right isn't going to accept arguments from doctors anyway. Imagine that doctors could say, hey, you know what? It's a person after 27 weeks. The right's not going to accept that anyway. So maybe it's sort of a futile effort to debate that. And at the end of the day, we don't make law on philosophical or religious beliefs, or at least we shouldn't. Although we know that fundamentally Christianity is at the core of much of anti-abortion sentiment in the United States. Fine. So Slug's idea is the right says abortion is murder, so the state can legislate around abortion on the basis that it's like murder. But really, we should be saying, no. Abortion is more like organ or tissue donation. This is the idea. And in fact, before the fetus is viable outside the womb, it's really a lot like organ and tissue donation in terms of our legal framework around it. We don't force people ever to give away an organ or to donate blood or to donate plasma, as Trump used to call it, or bone marrow. We don't do that. Even in some cases, and there are many of them, where someone needs blood or bone marrow or an organ to survive, right? There's a life on the line. We never legislate that you have to do this thing. You have to donate bone marrow or whatever the case may be. And in fact, people regularly require those donations to survive, and many people don't get them and they die. People die on waiting lists all the time. That's tragic. But we don't force anyone to go under the knife and donate a kidney or get hooked up to, it's not an IV. It's to get hooked up to have blood or plasma or whatever taken. And we never charge people who don't do those things with murder nor manslaughter. It's never even part of the conversation. You've got to register as an organ donor to even be contacted. Corpses can't even be harvested for anything without written permission, right? If forcing organ or tissue or blood donation is considered too invasive for anyone to ever talk about doing it by law, how is forcing a woman to lend her uterus for a fetus to develop acceptable? since it's even more of an invasion of privacy and a violation of bodily autonomy than donating blood or plasma or a kidney. The fetus uses the mother's body for 9 months. It causes permanent changes. It risks health issues. Potentially, you can even die through pregnancy. Not to mention, obviously, the responsibility being placed on the mother for 18 plus years, 25 plus years, 35 plus years. Some other millennials will understand. So the idea here is, from Slug, maybe the left should stop arguing about when life begins and start forcing the anti-choicers to admit they think the fetus deserves more rights than everyone else. And women deserve less bodily autonomy than everyone else. It's still sort of an in-process idea that a viewer sent to me. I wanted to share it with you. Send me your thoughts as to whether you think this might be a better angle or a useful angle. And again, remember, it's not so much about convincing the anti-choice right-wingers. It's about framing the argument in terms that aren't subject to just philosophy. I mean, we don't force organ donation. We just don't. And lives do depend on it. We don't force tissue donation, blood donation, whatever. And lives do depend on it. If we don't do that, the invasion of forcing a woman to carry a pregnancy to term is far more significant. And so how do we justify that? Doesn't seem to make any sense. Let me know what you think. We'll do a follow-up. You can find me on Twitter at @dpacman. And I want to mention again, and we are seeing what's happening with our mailing list is out of this world. On Monday, I mentioned that on Memorial Day, we're going to do a one-day membership special. We're going to blow out memberships to finish out May. We may run out of memberships, quite frankly, at a major discount. We're doing it on a holiday because my lawyer would never allow me to do this on a business day. He would say, no, don't. This is too cheap. Our accountant would say, David, this is terrible. Business manager would say it's too big of a discount. So I'm doing this on a federal holiday while they're all sleeping and not paying attention. Monday, Memorial Day, get on our mailing list at davidpacman.com. You'll get an email telling you, here's the discount code. It's good today only. Become a member, and you'll get all the perks that come with membership. The bonus show, of course, which Alex Jones hates.
Oh, the bonus show where you want to make money, but everybody else that makes money to fund themselves is bad.
He's furious about it. The commercial-free audio feed of the show, the commercial-free video feed of the show, priority access during viewer town halls, the next of which I'll be announcing soon. So all you have to do today is get on the mailing list at davidpacman.com, and then you'll hear from us on Memorial Day. Don't forget that the best way to support the David Pacman Show is by becoming a member, which gives you access to the daily bonus show, the regular show with no commercials. You also get access to our entire archive of every episode dating back a really long time and plenty of other awesome membership perks. Go to joinpacman.com and use the coupon code BETTER21 for a huge discount. Joinpacman.com. In the midst of everything happening with the Supreme Court, we learned last week through this leaked decision that in all likelihood, unless something changes, the current Supreme Court is going to be voting to overturn Roe v. Wade as soon as the end of June. In the midst of all of this, protests at the houses of Supreme Court justices, et cetera, and of course, the search for the leaker, which I really wonder how that's going. Public confidence in the Supreme Court has absolutely collapsed from where it was. There's a new poll. Confidence in Supreme Court collapsed since conservatives took control. This is a new Yahoo News YouGov poll, which shows that over the last 20 months, American confidence in the court has collapsed. This is a period that started with Trump and Republicans putting in that 6-3 conservative majority with the replacement of Ruth Bader Ginsburg by Amy Coney Barrett, and that this has culminated with the leak of the draft signaling that Roe v. Wade will be overturned. The last time Yahoo YouGov asked about confidence in the court was September of 2020. That was just a few days after Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. Then 70% of registered voters said they had some or a lot of confidence in the court, whereas 30% said they had a little or none. In the new survey, a 40-point swing where now only half of voters expect some or a lot of confidence, while the other half now expresses a little or no support. That is, those are incredible numbers. And as the article points out, views on key aspects of American life rarely shift that suddenly. And the question is why? The question is why? Now, there's tons of speculation as to why, but one important element of this to understand is that we now have 5 of the 9 justices on the court appointed by presidents who lost the popular vote. So just take a step back for a second. Most Americans believe that abortion should be legal in most cases. Americans are more in favor of abortion today than at any point during the Roe v. Wade era. And we have this forthcoming decision where the Supreme Court is going to say, no, we're getting rid of Roe v. Wade. Abortion isn't even going to be a right anymore. Okay, well, let's look at the makeup. It's a 6-3 conservative court in which 5 of the 9 justices were chosen by presidents who lost the popular vote. George W. Bush selected Chief Justice Roberts and Samuel Alito. Donald Trump selected Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. 5 of the 9, the loser of the popular vote got to pick. Okay, that's number one. Number 2, those choices, again, made by a president who lost the popular vote, were confirmed by a completely anti-democratic Senate in which California, with 30-something million people, and Wyoming, with under 1 million people, I hope I'm getting these population numbers correct, 30-something million, under 1 million, California and Wyoming have the same number of votes. Consider the lopsided and undemocratic nature of this. And of course, we have to also say one of those seats should have been Barack Obama's choice, should have been Merrick Garland. But thanks to Mitch McConnell from the completely anti-democratic Senate being able to obstruct that nomination long enough for Donald Trump to eventually install Neil Gorsuch. So it makes sense that with such a prominent decision now in the forefront, you would have Americans saying, I'm not confident in this court. I don't approve of what this court is doing. And some, Coleman Hughes yesterday said it's a feature of the Supreme Court that it is sort of insulated from public pressure, public opinion, etc. That's fine. That would be a feature to me as well. As I thought about it overnight, I came to this realization. That's all well and good, assuming we're confident about the way we got to these 9 people on the court. And I'm not. I mean, again, 2 presidents who lost the popular vote got to decide thanks to the votes from Republican senators from disproportionately lower population states, giving these Republican senators outsized influence. I'm going from memory here, and don't hold me to this, but we looked at a statistic where something like, I think it was you could have a situation where you have a majority in the Senate with the senators that represent only 17% of the American population because of that population skew. I hope that makes sense. So it makes sense to me that you are seeing this swing. As many have noted, you don't usually see such significant swings on major issues of public opinion, something that it's not every day. People don't think every day about, do I have confidence in the Supreme Court or don't I? That's not something most people think about every day. People are busy living their lives and working. And to see such a drastic swing in such a short period of time isn't common. And so on the one hand, it's good in that lots of people seem to be paying attention to something that they often wouldn't. On the other hand, we don't really have much recourse here. And that's by design. And that would be fine, assuming we felt good about the process. I don't. And I'm curious to hear from you. One of the funniest little details in this entire saga of people protesting at the homes of not only Supreme Court justices, but also Republican senators, is that Republican Senator Susan Collins from Maine decided to call the police because there was chalk writing on the sidewalk outside of her house. This is like the epitome of the triggered snowflake. And I am sensitive to others being sensitive about protests at their homes. And we had a very good conversation on the show yesterday with Coleman Hughes about it. But the police over chalk, when you supposedly are a defender of speech, I'm fine having a good faith conversation about protests at people's houses. I'm glad to do it. But when you're talking about free speech absolutists who all of a sudden say chalk isn't okay, that's a bit of a problem. Business Insider reports Susan Collins called the police to report, quote, defacement of public property after someone wrote an abortion rights message in chalk on a public sidewalk outside of her house. Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine, one of just two nominally pro-choice Republicans in the Senate, called the police Saturday night because of an abortion rights message written in chalk in front of her house in Bangor, Maine. According to the Bangor Daily News, officers responded to a call at 9:20 because a message appeared on the sidewalk. It read, "Susie, please, Mainers want WHPA. Vote yes, clean up your mess." WHPA means the Women's Health Protection Bill, which would codify abortion rights afforded by Roe v. Wade into federal law. This is an idea that is an important idea. It's being increasingly discussed. Well, okay, the Supreme Court can overturn Roe v. Wade by legal precedent, but if we codify abortion rights into federal law, it overrides and supersedes that. The message was not overtly threatening, said Wade Betters, a spokesperson for the police department. We are grateful, Susan Collins said to the Daily News, we are grateful to the Bangor police officers and the city public works employees who responded to the defacement of public property in front of our home. Guys, I mean, we're not talking about poster paint here. We're not talking about spray paint. We're talking about chalk, which washes away when it rains or with a bucket or a hose. To call this defacement, this isn't graffiti. This is what kids do all the time. They write with chalk on the sidewalk. And there's this, I don't want to put all of this on Susan Collins because it's not uniquely her that's the hypocrite here. But it's the big picture of all of this. On the one hand, Republicans have been so hesitant to say the president led and incited an insurrection and there should be no consequences on the one hand. And then on the other hand, someone wrote with chalk, call the cops. It's one of these. The message here is a message of authoritarianism, of shutting down public speech and protest. Throwing things at a senator, of course not. Absolutely not. Going on the property of individuals to protest, absolutely not. Whatever else. No. Writing with chalk on the sidewalk, that seems like a real problem when that now becomes something that police are called over. You can't write with chalk on a sidewalk, but then you can tell the woman to carry a pregnancy to term, or you don't want to hold Trump accountable for the things that he did. So I think that this is an outrageous little micro episode about how the big picture conversation is kind of missing the forest for the trees. And by the way, I got a few angry emails after my conversation yesterday with Coleman Hughes from people saying, David, how can you be worried about protests at someone's house when women are being disenfranchised from even being able to make decisions about their own bodies, decisions which can be life and death? They're two separate situations. I am completely, overwhelmingly, unequivocally disgusted by what we believe to be the forthcoming decision on Roe v. Wade. And I also think there's a good faith discussion to be had about protesting at the houses of Supreme Court justices. It's okay to be able to discuss the two things separately. And a handful of people or so, maybe more like a dozen, didn't like that we were even having the discussion. And by the way, I also have a problem with that. I know about this whole we're just asking questions thing and how it can be used to cover in ways that aren't particularly productive. Oh, when Tucker says, some people say 10,000 people died from the COVID vaccine. We're just asking questions on the show. I get the problematic nature of just asking questions. But to say I shouldn't even be having the conversation about protest strategy and tactics. No, guys, that's not that's not any kind of support of robust discussion that I can agree with. So maybe rethink that. We will have more on all of these stories on the David Pakman Show Instagram, which you can find at David Pakman Show. And if you want to see me with a big black and white animal, was it a cow or was it a zebra? Many people are asking what exactly was the animal I was pictured with. Follow me on my personal Instagram at david.pakman. We'll take a quick break and be right back. If you value what we do at the David Pakman Show, remember to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show, where you can get access to behind the scenes videos, the daily bonus show, the commercial-free daily show, as well as special discounts on merch, including hats, hoodies, mugs, and t-shirts. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Okay, so there's like a wacky, almost funny element to this story. And then there's a very real, scary, politically substantive element to this story. We're going to start with a video from, it's so hard to even say what this is. I believe that this is a Christian church, okay? And this is a rant at a Christian church about how the right, the religious right, wants to take control of the educational system and use the educational system to indoctrinate students with a conservative, right-wing, reactionary, Christian, Bible-based worldview as they see it. This is really scary. Now, what's the wacky part about it? Well, I can't tell whether this is a Christian church or an insane asylum. There's people screaming. You'll notice that while the guy on the microphone is ranting, you'll hear other voices. And if you're watching, you'll see people in the background talking over the guy. At one point, it seems like the guy is speaking in tongues, I think, although I'm not an expert in speaking in tongues. And this is a movement where I can't tell whether this is a church or an insane asylum. Take a look at this.
Now, Lord, according to your word, we take authority over our education system. And Lord, we call for righteousness in our education system, truth in our education system, justice in our education system.
I think the woman over the guy's right shoulder just keeps saying, that's right, that's right, that's right. That's right. I don't, it seems almost like this is it seems like the spirit has overtaken them.
We cast down that demonic hold of indoctrination in our education system.
So anyway, now the guy's casting a spell, I guess, to take control of schools.
And God, we declare that there's no education outside of the word of the living God. There's no true education outside of
the other. Oh, whoa, hold on. I almost talked over the tongues. Hold on a second.
Education outside of the
right. So, extremely dangerous view about education. We want to take over education with Christianity, but also they're speaking in tongues and screaming, and it seems like everybody should be medicated.
Word of the living God. We declare according to your word that all of our children shall be disciples, taught of the Lord, and great shall be the peace and undisturbed composure of our children. So God, we call for righteousness in every level of education. I call forth righteousness.
Does anybody know why everybody's talking over this guy in the background? I mean, it's a bizarre scene.
Superintendents, righteous teachers, righteous principals, righteousness now. And that by righteousness and the word of righteousness, the demonic and the deception and the evil that is taught in the classroom would be driven out by the hand of God. Driven out by the hand of God. Driven out now by the hand of God. And God, I thank you for young people who are taught according to your word in Jesus.
So I don't even really understand what the hell is going on there. But the really serious part is they want to take over public education. And now for a slightly just as wrong, but less obviously out of their mind view on this, we go to a clip of Tony Perkins. Tony Perkins, the well-known homophobic right-wing Christian activist that we've followed for a long time on the show. He said, well, listen, we want young conservatives to go into teaching in public schools so that we can put our Christian worldview into public schools, despite the fact that that's against the law. There's supposed to be separation of church and state. You're not supposed to be teaching Christianity other than as a comparative religious type class in public schools. This is their plan. Listen to Tony Perkins.
I don't think we should abandon the public schools. I encourage young people who want to go into the teaching profession to see the public schools as a mission field. We cannot abandon it. We need to run for the school board. We need to be teachers. We need to be administrators, but we don't need to sacrifice our children. Understand
what he means by the public schools are a mission field. He's talking about missionaries in the same way that missionaries would go to, over the years, they would go to Brazil and make first contact in the Amazon and try to convert people to Christianity. He's saying, see the public schools as a mission field where we go in and do the exact same thing.
In that environment. So I am not saying we abandon the public schools. Too many kids are going to continue to go there, but it shouldn't be our kids. We should send our kids as teachers and instructors.
Right. So what Tony Perkins is saying is, and think about, this is Dark Ages stuff. This is, let's do the following. Here's the idea. Our kids, we send to Christian private schools where or we do Christian homeschooling, which is, remember, the overwhelming majority of homeschooling in the U.S. is Christian oriented. I think 75, close to 80% of it. Their kids, they do Christian homeschooling or Christian private schools, but then they still infect the public schools with their ideology by taking the kids who went to the Christian private schools, having them go into teaching, and then send them into the public schools also to teach Christianity and to see it as a mission field, as they say, to be missionaries in public schools, which, at least in theory, are supposed to abide by separation of church and state. This is really scary stuff. So, listen, I get it. The guy speaking in tongues, it's crazy where we say medicate everyone, psych eval, 72-hour hold, but they have money, at least some. They're well organized, relatively speaking. And this is exactly what they're telling us what they're planning to do. And we know it's what they're planning to do. And when you look at the level of organization, I mean, look, when the school mask and vaccine stuff got going during COVID, as the vaccines came out, that level of organization, it was a lot of these same people who were showing up to the school board meetings. They are organized. There's no doubt about it. And so if we don't take this threat seriously, they may be far more successful than maybe we're willing to admit. Speaking of conspiracy theories, I want to talk now about Fox host Maria Bartiromo. Back in January, a Republican gave Maria the idea that there's going to be a midterm COVID variant. The idea being that this is a contrived, imaginary variant meant specifically for Democrats, I guess, to justify new or returning mandates related to the pandemic and I guess somehow help them win in November. Although I'll be honest, I don't even know how a midterm variant would help Democrats in the sense that if all of a sudden you need lots of new restrictions and it's Democrats that are in power, wouldn't voters say, oh, look, Democrats have failed us because we've got to do restrictions again? It doesn't even make any sense to me. But Maria Bartiromo likes it. So here's where she first got the idea. This was during an interview in January with U.S. Senate candidate, the current Missouri Attorney General, Eric Schmidt. He seemed to have kind of given her the idea of a midterm variant, and she liked it. Take a look.
Back with the AG of Missouri, Eric Schmidt. And AG, you also questioned the timing of the mandates and why he circumvented Congress and put it all on OSHA, which doesn't have such legislative authority.
No, and I think that's exactly right. You think back here, Joe Biden had taken this off the table. He had said many times that he wasn't going to have a vaccine mandate. Afghanistan happened, which is perhaps the worst foreign policy disaster in generations.
Wrong.
A betrayal of the American soldier, billions of dollars of equipment left behind. a total disaster. And then immediately after that, to change the narrative, he announces these vaccine mandates, which are clearly unconstitutional, unlawful. And, you know, why the Supreme Court agreed with us in court last week. But I think it was a distraction, and a cynical one at that. And the American people deserve better. But look, this has never been about the policy. This is about power and control, and they're going to continue to do this. You watch, Maria. The things that he can't get done legislatively is going to continue to move forward administratively, whether it's on quote-unquote climate change. We've got an existential threat. We've got, we're at a tipping point. He's going to charge the deputy undersecretary of the EPA, who's not accountable to anybody, to do these things, and we're going to push back. If he can't get federal, if he can't federalize the elections, there'll be a midterm variant, watch, that's coming where he empowers administrative agencies. But the good news here is the states are going to continue to fight back to protect individual rights and help save this country.
Yeah, I think you're right about that midterm election variant. It's a great point.
So there was Maria Bartiromo first getting that idea. And now she's repeating this constantly. I'm not going to play all 5 or 6 examples of it for you, but here is one from her show 2 days ago. This was from her Fox Business Mornings with Maria program. Here she is now. She's taken this midterm variant thing hook, line, and sinker.
We don't know the extent of the investigation yet, Maria. And I think the reason for doing this, the reason this guy has stepped in and put up millions of dollars to take care of Hunter Biden, bailing him out once again, is that it's pretty embarrassing for the president of the United States to have his son go to jail. I mean, the bottom line, they do probably have a cause for indicting Hunter Biden and putting him on trial, and nobody on the left wants to see that happen. But I have to say, this whole thing, I think when Republicans take over control of Congress, which I hope and expect to happen in November, I think there's going to be a lot of investigation of really what has gone on here. Where does all this money come from? If Hunter Biden's been making so much money on Ukrainian and Chinese and Russian deals, how in the world did he not pay his taxes? Why did that happen? Why was he lying to the IRS? Because that's basically what you're talking about. I think it's astonishing that all this has gone on and the liberal media continues to be completely uninterested in the story.
Yeah, well, you said when the Republicans take over. How about if the Republicans take over? Because the Washington Post is reporting more COVID on the horizon in the fall. As I've been predicting, the midterms variant is...
Okay, the midterms variant. All right, so let's break this down in pieces. First and foremost, have Democrats created any variant? Of course not. No, that's absurd. Are there more and more COVID cases? Yes. In fact, COVID cases are spiking dramatically. I'm not necessarily saying anything in particular should be done. I'm not giving you my medical opinion because I'm not a doctor. What I'm telling you is COVID cases are increasing dramatically. The U.S. was down up to about 28,000 official cases a day in late March. The U.S. is now all the way back up to 70,000 cases a day. And with so many people not testing at all or testing at home and not reporting that they're sick, the real number of infections could be 2 or even 3 times as high. We might already be back up to somewhere between 150,000 and 200,000 cases a day. Am I saying that we should do anything differently? No, I'm not saying anything one way or the other. That's for medical experts to decide. But cases are spiking like crazy. That's number one. Number two, Maria Bartiromo seems to be suggesting that it is the Democrats that come up with strategically timed, contrived stories or issues meant to benefit them in elections. But the truth is that it's Republicans who have a very long history of doing that. Ebola in 2014, I remember reporting on it 8 years ago, leading up to the midterm elections of 2014. I remember covering Rand Paul. I remember I see myself sitting in the old studio covering these stories. Republicans were going crazy about the Ebola pandemic, which was essentially contained in West Africa. I think that there were between 2 and 4 cases that got to the U.S., one of which died, and they didn't even catch it in the U.S. I don't remember the details, but we're talking about numbers you can count on one hand. And I told everybody, this issue disappears the day after the midterms. And we never heard about it again after the midterms. That was a contrived issue by Republicans. Another example, the migrant caravans. Every time we start getting close to an election, Fox News, migrant caravan is departing in Nicaragua, heading all the way up. They're expected at the U.S.-Mexico border 6 weeks, 8 weeks from now. What? Democrats aren't doing anything about it. The migrant caravan story is a contrived issue with the timing meant to help Republicans in elections, midterm elections and general elections. Voter fraud. I mean, again, that was timed starting 6 months before the 2020 election to have a very particular effect, which I won't even go into now because you all know about it already. It is the Republicans who do the carefully and deliberately timed fake issues. A midterm variant. What we have is another COVID spike. And why we have it and what should be done are not the topics for this segment. But the idea that Democrats have created that in any way is completely absurd. And the really sad thing is, I've said it before, Maria Bartiromo used to be a good financial reporter. 20 years ago, when I first got into following the stock market, I'd watch her on CNBC in the morning before school. She really was doing good financial reporting. She's become a conspiracy nut, Trump brown-noser, and it's really a shame. It really is. Follow us on social media, interact with the David Pakman Show community, see exclusive content, see when we're taking calls live, and stay up to date on other big show announcements. We post daily. Find us on Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, and TikTok. One of the biggest questions if Elon Musk does successfully purchase Twitter is whether he's going to let Donald Trump back on Twitter. Donald Trump was banned from Twitter permanently in 2021. Remember, there are some who say that Trump was banned from Twitter in order to hurt him in the 2020 election. He wasn't banned until 2021. So assuming time moves forward, which I think we sort of think it does, unless you want to get into some metaphysical stuff, that isn't true. But Trump was banned from Twitter in 2021. Elon Musk was recently asked, would you let him back on Twitter? And Elon Musk said that he would. Now, I have some thoughts about this that some in my audience may not agree with. I'll get to those in a moment. Let's first listen to what Elon Musk said.
Are you planning to let Donald Trump back on?
Well, I think there's a general question of should Twitter have permanent bans? And you know, I've talked with Jack Dorsey about this, and he and I are of the same mind, which is that permanent bans should be extremely rare and really reserved for people where they're trying to for accounts that are bots or spam scam accounts, where there's just no legitimacy to the account at all. I do think that it was not correct to ban Donald Trump. I think that was a mistake because it alienated a large part of the country and did not ultimately result in Donald Trump not having a voice. He is now going to be on Truth Social, as will a large part of the right in the United States, and so I think this could end up being, frankly, worse than having a single forum where everyone can debate. I guess the answer is that I would reverse the perma ban. Obviously, I don't own Twitter yet, so this is not like a thing that will definitely happen, because what if I don't own Twitter? But my opinion, and Jack Dorsey, I want to be clear, shares this opinion, is that we should not have perma bans. Now that doesn't.
Okay, so Elon Musk says he thinks Trump was wrongly banned. Now, Donald Trump was rightly banned. Let's go through this in stages, okay? Trump broke Twitter terms of service, absolutely. Trump should have been banned. However, I am very much in the direction of lifetime bans should be extremely rare, and Trump probably shouldn't have gotten a lifetime ban. I'm not saying he should be unbanned today. I would be completely fine with it having been, okay, you incite violence, that's a 5-year ban, or 10 or 3, or it doesn't even really matter the specifics of it. But I generally don't believe in irreversible decisions. Not that a Twitter ban is like the death penalty, but I am against the death penalty because if you make a mistake, you can't undo it once you've executed somebody. So permanent bans for bot accounts, accounts that are fake, pretending to be someone else, impersonation, automated activity. Oh, absolutely, no question about that. Those are bans for life. That's just purging trash, right? I mean, we permaban all of that stuff on on all of our platforms when we see that type of thing. When it comes to violations of terms of service, I still am okay with some bans for life, but they've got to be like, I don't even know, you live stream yourself committing a crime, murdering someone, whatever, lifetime ban. YouTube does that, all these, that's okay. But even as bad as what Trump did was, and he did really bad things. I mean, you can argue that his actions, his actions in total, and Twitter was part of it, led to real world violence, and it's terrible and he should have been banned. I still lean towards most cases are a ban for a specific amount of time, subject to review and revision. And I would be fine for that review and revision to determine Trump gets another 3 years or whatever. I'm totally fine with that. But I would lean heavily in the direction of these are for a sort of specified amount of time in general. Now, when we talk about Trump specifically, realistically, he may never change, and he might get back on and do the exact same stuff. In which case you might say, well, there's no reason to think he'd do anything differently, and so we're going to keep him banned. I'm fine with that. The other problem, there's two other problems with this anyway, and it's sort of like a fraught question. One is we know that terms of service are inconsistently applied. They're inconsistently applied in different cases based on how prominent accounts are. And they're inconsistently applied also just on the basis of content. That's just a thing. And I'm not saying that they're inconsistently applied in terms of a left or right wing bias. That is a debate, but I'm not even dipping into that right now. Just terms of service are inconsistently applied. And we experience that as well. There are, on YouTube, for example, because our content is seen by more people than channels with 1,000 subscribers, there are lots of things we get demonetized for that other really small channels don't get hit with just because no one's paying attention. And you can argue that that's right or wrong or whatever, but we have an inconsistent application of terms of service. And then the other thing is, I am right there with you that the idea of the bans get reviewed. Who does the reviewing, and do we trust them to do the reviewing? And I don't have an answer to that right now. So I'm speaking in principle. I think for the most part, we should almost never have bans for life. Extend them, whatever, almost like a parole hearing. I'm fine with that. Do you trust the people you put in charge to do it becomes a real question. We have not talked about Jordan Peterson for a while, but he is back on the sort of speaking trail. And our colleague John sent me this clip from Jordan Peterson at Stanford University a few days ago. This was on, I guess it was a couple weeks ago. This was a sort of an event on classical liberalism at the Graduate School of Business at Stanford University. And I don't even know how to explain this. Jordan Peterson started weeping because he's so upset about climate activism, not climate change. He's not upset because of climate change. He's upset because of climate activism. And he seems unstable, completely unhinged, really seems to have lost it. I'm going to play a couple minutes because you've got to see the lead up. And the lead up is he finds it so upsetting that sometimes people are negative about the outlook of the planet and humanity. And he says that the problem is that people are being, people are getting depressed because of climate activists. Okay, check this out.
Shouldn't even have any children. It's like, no, there's no excuse for that. There's zero excuse for that. I saw a professor at an event, something like this. He came out and trumpeted this bloody environmentally friendly house he built. And, you know, fair enough, man. It was a pretty interesting house, but not everybody had the $4 million that it took him to build it. And I'm not criticizing his money even. It's like, he's had some money, good for him. He built a house, okay. But then to trumpet that as a moral virtue, well, you're pushing it there. And then he came out to all the kids and he said, you know, my wife and I decided that we were only going to have one child. And I think that's one of the most ethical things we could have possibly done. And I would strongly encourage you to do the same. I thought, you son of a bitch. You get up in front of these young people. A lot of these kids were children of first-generation immigrants from China. And he showed all these images, you know, of these terrible factories in China, these endless rows of sterile mechanism that were subordinating all the Chinese people to this terrible, you know, capitalist machine. And I thought,
if you're still following this, it's about to get really weird.
I don't understand. Half the audience is looking at those factories and thinking, that's a hell of a lot better than struggling through the mud under Mao, buddy. And so I don't know where he thought he was, but to come out in front of all those kids and basically tell them that the whole human enterprise is so goddamn corrupt that the best thing they could possibly do is limit their multiplication, and to think of himself as a scholar and an educator, it was just, I did say something, by the way. It was rather uncomfortable, and he stomped off the stage. But that's no message for young people. There's no excuse for that. And you think, well, you know, we're going to destroy the planet. We have to do this. We have to demoralize the youth to be ethical. It's like, yeah, really, that's your theory? You're going to demoralize young people to be ethical? That's your theory? It's like, you should go home and think about that for like a year. And I'm passionate about this, you know, because you have no idea how many people that's killing. You have no idea. I see people everywhere, all over the world. They're so demoralized, especially young people with a conscience, because they've been told since they were little that there's nothing to them but corruption and power. It's like, how the hell do you expect them to react?
So this is bizarre, obviously. There's a real difference between young people are told that you are made up of corruption and whatever, and hey, we have some hard problems that we're facing and they need to be solved. And you might make choice. I mean, there's an entire movement. I think it's called the anti-natalist, which basically says like, we can't bring people, everybody should stop reproducing because we are rapidly heading towards a lack of sustainability and on and on and on. Now, I happen to disagree with that. I think the way we solve our problems is actually by reproducing and creating people that are going to solve these problems. That's my view, because I guess I'm more optimistic than pessimistic. But this whole thing, weeping because people learn that things aren't looking so good in some senses, that it would be immoral to hide everyone from that. Now, I'm with you. We don't want to demoralize people. No, we want to say, hey, we look at all these problems humanity has solved. And then here are the problems now facing us, and let's solve them. But I would be crying over how we're destroying the planet, not about how kids might find it upsetting that we're destroying the planet. That seems very, very backwards. And another one of these really weird weepy, he seems emotionally dysregulated is what that seems like. And also sort of wrong on the facts, if you can be both at once, which clearly you can. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. We had a discussion the other day about what I call the smoked salmon bagel index. It's like my version of the Big Mac or the Whopper index, where I go, okay, like what's a smoked salmon bagel cost in different places? And the Eggman wrote in with what is quite frankly not a good suggestion. Take a listen to this, or he called in rather.
Hey, Dave, I have a question about the smoked salmon bagel index.
Please.
In Western New York, where I live, you can buy the smoked salmon cream cheese spread. It's like cream cheese and lox spread mixed together. It's that pink cream cheese, right? And then you put that on a bagel. It's like having smoked salmon and cream cheese on your bagel, right?
Yeah, you know, I mean, listen, I think everybody should have whatever they want. I reject the notion, and I reject it wholeheartedly.
That is a frickin' predator right there.
Yes, that the pink cream cheese that has some smoked salmon kind of blended into it is the same as properly putting smoked salmon on the bagel. It's just, I can't, and I know we're getting very deep into Jewish cuisine here. It's a really tough, I'm not going to die on this hill, but it's a tough thing for me to accept.
You get one of those for like a couple of bucks. Is that good enough for you, or do you actually need the actual smoked salmon and the capers, all that stuff for $17 or $11? Shalom, brother.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not a buyer at $17 for a smoked salmon bagel, but at prices south of that, you'll certainly find me considering it. But no, listen, honestly, that smoked salmon cream cheese, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's just a whole different thing. It's a completely different element. And I think everybody should be aware of that. We have a fantastic bonus show for you today. By the way, how many people will be mad because they are taking the smoked salmon segment seriously? Unfortunately, probably dozens. It's a sad thing. On today's bonus show, insurrectionist Senator Josh Hawley is introducing a measure to strip Disney of copyright protections. These people with their hypocrisy, they love copyright protections. They want patent protection forever for pharmaceuticals and all this stuff. Oh, Disney doesn't like the Don't Say Gay bill? Strip them of copyright protection. Josh Hawley, horrible person. We'll talk about that. There is a bill that will help women pay to travel to California for abortions if needed. The bill is moving forward. We are going to talk about that. And also, after this viral video of boxer Mike Tyson showed him punching an airline passenger, he is not going to be charged for that. And we will talk about why and what the different elements of that legal decision are. All on today's bonus show. Sign up at joinpacman.com. I can't wait to see you on today's bonus show.
Oh, the bonus show where you want to make money, but everybody else that makes money to fund themselves is bad.
If Alex Jones doesn't like it, you can be damn sure that you probably will. You can use the coupon code OBAMNA to get a discount off of your choice of membership at joinpacman.com. You must spell it correctly. It's like correctly incorrectly.
Obamna.
OBAMNA. And you'll get a great discount. We'll see you on the bonus show.